chief in Seattle, Washington is resigning just as the city council cut funding to the police department. Chief Carmen says she is retiring effective September 2nd. She was Seattle's first black police chief and has the support of many rank-and-file officers. Best was the center of the debate over the police use of force and says her department is going through some difficult times in dealing with the protests in the wake of George Floyd's death. Joining me now by Skype to talk more about the issue is Chuck Wexler, Executive Director of the Police Executive Research Forum, an independent research and policy organization. Chuck, welcome back to the show.
Nice to be here.
What's your reaction, first of all, to Chief Best's retirement announcement?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that she has to leave. She's got a lot of experience. And, the interesting thing about Seattle is it was under a consent decree. So that is a department that spent about $100 million in the last 6 years reforming their practices. So if there's any police department in the country that's, adopted many of the progressive reforms, it's Seattle. So it's ironic to see, Seattle in such turmoil because they really do reflect, at least from a policing standpoint, some of the best practices.
What influence do you think that these protests against police brutality that we're seeing all across the country are having on calls to defund the police departments?
Well, I don't understand the fund movement. I do understand, what happened with George Floyd, and that's a tragedy. That's a crime. But that you should jump from what happened that day in Minneapolis to defunding the police doesn't make any sense. If the police have issues, and there are issues in the policing, there are issues like in any profession, but the police need, they need an investment. Crime is surging in about 20 cities. So this is a time to put your foot on the accelerator, to step into the issues, not step away. Taking away from policing isn't going to make policing better. It's not going to make communities better. People expect good policing. You talk to people who live in some of the worst areas in the country, they want the police. They want good police. They don't want brutal police. They want good police. And you defund the police. In Seattle, they were talking about a 50% reduction. In New York, they took $1 billion away. In Los Angeles, a couple of $100 million. If we want to recruit some of the best and the finest, and we want to change the culture, you need to invest in policing. So defunding is, it doesn't make any sense. It's how are you going to fix something by taking something away from it? That doesn't make any sense.
Now you mentioned this, we've seen a rise in homicides across the country in at least 6 cities. Federal law enforcement agencies are now working in conjunction with state and local officials to fight this violent crime, but we're still seeing mixed reaction to this response.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's really, we've had a lot of going on. Let's face it, the last 4 months with COVID-19, big issue with demonstrations and with the George Floyd incident. But at the same time, in about 20 of the top cities in the country, you're seeing about a 37% increase in murders since May of this year. So, this is where we should really be concerned. We haven't seen some of these numbers in 3-4 years. We've done really good over time since New York experienced over 2,000 homicides last year. They had under 300. So, but this is worrisome. People should be concerned, and we should be concerned about getting good policing. We should be concerned about who are going to be the police leaders of the future, who are going to be the cops of the future. Policing is really important to everybody. Good policing. When you're in trouble, nothing better than a good cop, nothing worse than a bad one.
Exactly. Well, you recently spoke with Portland's, Oregon's police chief. What did he have to say?
Well, he's got a tough job. One day he's a lieutenant, next day he's a police chief. And, they've had 60 days straight of protests. And Portland's another city with a, police department, very progressive police department. And, it's like a nightmare for them in terms of not the demonstrators. The demonstrators, that's the interesting part of this issue. The demonstrators, for the most part, they're expressing their First Amendment rights. But it's this group within the demonstrators that it's wreaking havoc. And that's a real challenge. And that is worrisome. I mean, you have this group that is really causing a lot of problems in cities. And police departments never used to use tear gas. I mean, you have to go back 20, 25 years. And what do you do, like in Chicago the other day when they're breaking windows in Michigan Avenue and so forth? And so it's a challenging time. The police have been through these kind of things, but the answer has always been, how do we fix it? How do we make it better? Not how do we defund it, especially at a time when you're seeing crime going up.
Well, Chuck Wexler, Executive Director of the Police Executive Research Forum, thank you for your insight.
Thank you for having me.